Hello and welcome to this edition of the Airport News Show, a half-hour program about the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. I'm Debbie Jones, Community Relations Administrator. Cecil Field Airshow 2009. Haven't heard of it? Well, you're about to learn a whole lot about this exciting event coming soon to Cecil Field. And my guests today have all kinds of information that you don't want to miss. And so let's just jump right in and make the introductions and talk about this unprecedented event coming to Jacksonville. Let me start with Ms. Patty Wagstaff, who is a champion airshow pilot, who was also a 6-time member of the U.S. aerobatic team and is from right here, St. Augustine.
St. Augustine, I'm just down the road.
Well, welcome, Patty. Thank you so much for flying in to do this. We really appreciate you being here. And then Ms. Jane Estes, who is the founder and president of Fly, Drive, and Ride for MS Research. And Jane, you've been on the show a couple times, and we'll talk about that, so welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, Debbie.
Well, we're glad to have you. And then we have Miss Kelly Petticourt, who is the event director for Cecil Field at the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. Welcome, Kelly. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Debbie.
Well, there's a whole lot to cover, and I want to start off because this air show is the same in that it is a benefit air show, but it's a little different because we have two particular charities that the proceeds to this event are going towards. And so, Patty, if you would sort of give us a little background about yourself and then talk to us a little bit about the Alan Henley Foundation, which is one of the charities for this year's show.
Sure. I've been an airshow pilot for over 20 years. I fly airshows all over the country and Canada and Europe, and it's always nice when there's one close by where I live, and this one just happens to be at Cecil Field, and I usually start my season off in Florida or another warmer place, Arizona, when I used to live in Arizona, and then ended up in Florida. This year we're really excited about the Cecil Field Air Show. It's the first show of the season for a lot of us, and there are going to be more solo and team civilian performers at this air show than any other show in history that we can find out in this country, at least in recent history. I think they're in excess of 30 to 35 performers. It's going to be an amazing show, and we are all donating our time and our air show fees for the Alan Henley Foundation. Alan Henley is a very dear friend of all of ours in the airshow business. He was injured in an accident at home several months ago, and he's in a wheelchair now, and his wife and he has 2 small children have been really struggling to make ends meet, and their insurance hasn't covered everything that they thought it might, or you can't prepare for these things, of course, and so their expenses have been staggering. So we're getting together to try and bring as many people as we can out to the air show and put on a great air show for Jacksonville area in hope to benefit the Alan Henley Foundation.
Well, it sounds like, as you mentioned, there are going to be 35 performers, which is unprecedented number of performers. So,
yeah.
And all the air shows that you have done, that number hasn't been reached at the air shows you've been to?
Normally it's a really good mix of performers. You might have 1 or 2 solo aerobatic acts like myself. You might have a biplane with a wing walker. And of course we're going to have military events too at Cecil, quite a bit of military jets and static displays. But so you have military, and it's a real mix of kind of a variety show. But this one we're really going to have, it's going to be kind of an amazing, it's almost like a showcase of performers that we're going to have. So it's pretty unique, and I have never seen this many, at one. I said, gee, we're all going to be vying for this first spot, for the best spot of the day, whatever that is. Who knows?
Well, that's exciting, and we'll talk more about the type of performers and things like that.
Okay.
So Jane, with Fly, Drive, and Ride for MS Research, tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement with what we'll call FDR for MS Research, just because it's shorter.
It's much easier. Yes. Well, about 3 years ago, I had a good friend that came down with MS. She's young, cute girl. And I just said, somebody's got to do something. And what's got to be done is we need more money for MS Research. And I've been working as a volunteer on a number of different things up until then. So I thought, well, it's up to me. You know, if not me, then who? So I came up with the idea of doing a motorcycle ride to raise money for MS. And approached Cecil Field 3 years ago, and it turns out that they were doing an Airfest 3 years ago, and so I joined up. And as you know, the last 2 years there's been a Cecil Field Airfest, which has been a static air show. Last year we had about 6,000 people come out and had a good time. It was great fun. But this year, Alan Henley Foundation is just taking it to a whole new level. It's just amazing, and it's just so thrilling with all the air show, it becoming an air show instead of an air fest, and all the acts that are going to go on. But my part in it is still with the motorcycles. Every year we have a poker run to raise money for MS research. And MS, or multiple sclerosis, which I have trouble saying, is a chronic disease of the nervous system. And about 250,000 people in the U.S. have it. And it's a pretty awful disease. You find out it's a prime of life disease. You find out of the blue, between 20 years of age and 50, all of a sudden you find out, oh, I have this disease, and the disease is a erratic disease. It hits everybody differently. It can be one day you're in a wheelchair, or one day you're blind, or one day you're both. And the next day, or you know, a couple weeks later, it may clear up, or it may not clear up, or you know, it's a progressive up and down kind of disease. One that people don't really seem to know that much about, and I'm trying to get the word out about it, that there is a lot of research going on. They have some treatments, but there is no cure at this point. There is no definitive, all we know is that it's not hereditary and it's not a virus. We really don't know where it comes from and how people get it. And that's part of the research. But to make a long story short, I wanted to raise money for MS research, and 100% of the proceeds that my group, Fly, Drive, Ride, FDR, for MS research raises goes to strictly to research. In the last 2 years we've raised about 50,000. 100% of that went to research. This year, with the joint venture with the Airshow, it's really going to be an exciting thing. And there's going to be many things to do there. There's going to be food, wonderful shows, everything else.
But you're no stranger to MS.
No, that's a good point. I tend to not mention that I have MS, but I do. I've had MS I found out in '93. And luckily, you know, I'm staying in pretty good shape. There are other people. Oh, you end up, when you become part of that community, you end up, there are some really tragic tales out there. And it is a tragic disease. It's more of a quality of life versus a quantity of life disease. You know, that it strikes you in the prime years of your life, 20 to 50, when you're trying to raise your children and start your career, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a wheelchair. And it's very much sort of like Alan Henley. It comes out of nowhere. It could strike any of us at any time. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank
for
you.
that. And we'll talk more about the things, because I want to bring Ms. Kelly into the conversation. And your part is to bring all these pieces together logistically to have an air show like nothing that's ever been seen happen at Cecil Field. So.
Right. And I'm not alone in that.
Well, yeah. Okay, so you got that out of the way.
Yes.
It's a team effort.
It
We
is
absolutely
a big
know
team
that.
effort, and Alan Henley has a great event director, Miss Bobby Thompson, and she has been pulling all the performers together for the event, and I am working on mostly the ground logistics of putting together the event for Cecil Field, which is a wonderful opportunity for the Jacksonville Aviation Authority and Cecil Field to have this type of show come to our airport.
So what kind of things logistically on the ground? You've got the performers basically are sort of covered, if you will, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in preparation and during the show. So what are the big things that have to be considered?
Most of the big things that have to be considered are dealing with the static displays and the food, where we set things on the airport, doing the site plan, how it involves all of our tenants at Cecil Field and how it affects them for their normal operations and how they're so willing to help out with this wonderful event. So we are working very hard together, with hangar space, with ramp space, and multiple things on the airport that we all have to come together and pull together a show like this.
Now, we mentioned that the last 2 years was an air fest, which involved static displays and a couple of demonstration flybys, I think you call them.
Yes.
So how has it becoming a full-fledged, unprecedented air show changed the way you plan logistically for this?
Well, a lot of that planning will be done by Bobby and our air boss, Wayne Boggs, to pull together the performance side of things. But a lot of the planning for Cecil Field is more of the logistics of how much of everything that I'm going to need to support on the ground. And all the tenants have been wonderful in providing that. Tugs for the aircraft, going out to the different communities here in Jacksonville, the surrounding area, to get static display aircraft, and bringing in the Civil Air Patrol and many different entities coming in to volunteer to help, and it is all volunteer when it comes to the actual personnel out on the ramp to help with that.
A daunting task that is being very well managed, I must say.
Thank you.
So
we're trying.
Oh, I know. And it's going to be an awesome show, as we've mentioned. Now, Patty, you mentioned some of the different types of performers. I know we're going to have wing walkers, we're having solo and team demonstrations, even some mock aerobatic dog fights. Describe what you do, what type of show you put on, and what some of these shows, what some of these routines entail for those that are watching.
I think the really neat thing about air shows in general is that it's a real variety show. So you do get all types of acts and performers, and even performers that fly similar type of planes have their own style and really do different things, and we each have sort of signature maneuvers and things that we do better than the other person, and vice versa. So I'm not positive about who all the performers are going to be, but I know all of them when I see them on the list. So, but I can tell you, you're going to see some really exciting aerobatics. I know what I do. I call hardcore aerobatics, and it's low-level maneuvers that are done in a pretty small area, so I can keep it right in front of the crowd, and that's what you'll find from most of the smaller acts. Not the jets per se, because they have a lot more performance than we do, but fairly close, low-level performances. You'll see ribbon cuts, where you cut a ribbon inverted with your propeller. I think there's at least 2 of us doing that.
Upside down.
Upside down.
Getting close enough that you can cut a ribbon.
Yeah, you have pole holders that, in fact, we ought to auction off some places for pole holders, come to think of it. And that hold poles, and you have some string or crepe paper stretched across the ground between these 2 poles. It's about 20 feet above the ground, and we cut it inverted with our propeller. And it's called an inverted ribbon cut. It's an old barnstormer act.
Goodness.
And
are people excited about being one of the pole holders?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of people want to be a pole holder.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So over the age of 18, I prefer, but
Right.
yeah. No kids.
We'll make you sign a waiver.
Yeah, they sign a waiver. They're saying we know
Well, how
there's some risk involved, but I have never had any problems yet. I've been doing it for a long time.
You actually do the ribbon cutting yourself?
In the airplane's about 20 feet above the ground. So
Upside down?